I'm going to propose that we get started. There's normally a few more folks that join, but they can join as they're ready. I'm just going to share my screen. Hopefully you can see that now. So welcome everyone to the October OpenChain AI study group. As with all OpenChain and Linux Foundation meetings, the antitrust policy is shared at the start. Shane normally gives this, but sends his apologies given it's 11 o'clock local time where he is in the evening. So this is the Linux Foundation Antitrust Policy Notice. If your company is a member of the Linux Foundation, you can reach out to Andy Updegrove or your own legal counsel if you have any questions or concerns. So moving on into the kind of agenda of the day, it's kind of welcome back after a summer break for the OpenChain AI study group. Before we left for the summer, we'd kind of reached some goals and started a scratch pad with maybe some guides, and we'll come on to talk about those later. But in preparation for this call, a few of us are in the SPDX AI Bill of Materials profile, and we thought it would be a useful update for somebody to come and share the work that is being done in that area. Some of our learned colleagues in SPDX, so we can kind of learn and understand what is going on in the AI bomb space from SPDX. And Karen has joined us from that group, as well as a few others. So thank you, Karen, and I'll hand over to you in a moment. And then we've just got another slide on kind of where we touched on at the start of the year with our goals, check in with those. And then we have some time as part of this working session to go through the guide and seek input and guidance. Would anyone like to add anything else to the agenda or discuss anything? Hearing none, I'm happy to add anything to AOB if we think of anything as we go through, but I can hand over to Karen to give an update on the good work that is being done in SPDX.
Thank you, Matthew. So let me just pull up. I have a few slides. I know Victor's online and Gopi's online now. Myself, all of us have been working on SPDX, the AI and the data set profiles that is included as part of SPDX 3.0. I know that Matthew had said you guys want to talk about an AI bomb, but I just want to level set where my mind is, and that is I see SPDX as a system now, and AI is just one sort of component of it that has models, data sets, operational, but the whole restructuring of SPDX, which I think all you folks are pretty aware of. Now that we have this idea of profiles, you can mix and match them to describe your whole system. So I'm just going to go, and Gopi and Victor, feel free to, jump in. One other thing at the end I'll talk a bit about, because I know there's a lot going on in the AI space on governance and model cards, et cetera, et cetera. We're going to give you a feel for how we defined 3.0. And now we're starting to look at 3.1, and we'd love for others to come join us as we evolve into that. But in 3.0, we tried to keep it simple, because getting people to fill in these SPDX files is not an easy exercise. And we're trying to keep it so that, tools can be automated to get this information. But as we go forward, just a little background on myself. I'm more of, I participate in a lot of the standards groups, be it ISO. I'm on the ISO board. I'm on the EU project office. I'm on IEEE. And so I can see sort of where the standards are going. What will be the laws and the rules that the governments enforce is still an unknown to me. I just don't see a clear uh, way that everybody's going to come together. I know last week, or maybe it was the week before, the UN has declared that they're going to try and bring all the countries together, have a common set of rules. I just being in all these different standards boards. All of that was also, I'm on the EU AI Act was part of that group that created that regulation. So I see the standards side. Gopi is more on the, is with, Gopi, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm Gopi, happy to be here. I work as a researcher with Huawei Center for Software Excellence. I've been working for over a decade now on building AI applications, and more recently, I've been looking into how to build trustworthy AI application with ensure while being compliant with regulations uh, and compliantly using dataset licenses. And I also I research a lot into building trustworthy foundation model-based software. And over the past 3 years, along with Karen, called it the SPDX AI and dataset profile. And I come mostly from a researcher and an engineering background. And I'm happy to answer any questions. Thanks.
Thanks, Gopi. So hopefully everybody can see my screen.
Yes, we can.
Great. So I'm sure if you've seen any of Kate's presentations, you've seen this slide that is the timeline associated with SPDX. And with 2023, the AI was introduced into the fold of SPDX. So I think it's not a sort of surprise to anybody. What might be a surprise is, back in 2021, SPDX was actually ISO certified. There's a standard associated with it. And with AI, we're just going through that process right now for the same thing. With 3.0, we introduced profiles. So it's now sort of building blocks that you can create a system specification. And we plan in 3.1 to have even more profiles, of which, there's hardware, operations, this idea of functional testing. We in the AI working group are also working on sort of what impacts are needed in other fields to do with Gen AI, RAGs, prompting, etc., as well as I'm going to label it as harm or threats that are unique to AI. Where they go in the SPDX profiles is not quite clear yet, but we're at least having those discussions and starting to bring some of that in. So that'll give you just an overview. And as I say, it is being ISO certified, and it's going through the process right now for the AI portion. One of the other groups, Kate and others worked with the NTIA, Software Bill of Material Group. They're trying to establish minimum elements. And in 2019, this was the list. Several of us are working with this group right now to redefine what 2024 looked like, now that AI is sort of integrated. The good news is so far, the list that they have is pretty much everything is already in SPDX 3.0, with the exception of of more information around performance and benchmarking is the one area that we're trying to decide. But if there's interest in this, don't mind hooking you up or sharing on a periodic basis where that's coming. But this group is creating another minimum element list. As I say, we just launched, I don't know how many weeks ago it was Gopi, but 3.0.1, which really was just some cleanup activities, but AI and the data set or model card or models and data set are pretty well defined and solid. And now we're just trying to get some tools to generate these fields automatically. So one of the questions that Gopi and all of us get all the time is, how did you form the list that you have? So the good news is we started with model cards that Hugging Face, Google had, fact sheets that IBM had, data cards that were out there. Gopi worked with a group, another group in open source, open datology. Is that what it is, Gopi? And then myself, I tend to bring in a lot of the governance regulations. So we have been working with the medical device regulations, both in the US and the EU, to get them to say, you, as part of being certified a device, you need to have filled in these profiles and these fields to get certified. Similar with the EUA Act, we will go through this in a minute, but we've gone through all of the different clauses from the December sort of document and made sure that there's a field within SPDX where the information would be captured, and therefore making it relatively easy to get certified. Although that group continues to change, different definitions, etc. So it's ongoing. Myself, I've been heavily involved in the AI, which they're called ethical standards within IEEE, the 7000 series. So we also went through the exercise of whatever was said in these standards, we figured out if there was a field within SPDX that we could fill in and therefore could get certified by, 7001. It required these sets of fields. And we did the similar exercise with ISO as well, with their 72 or 27001 and 42001 standards. That's not to say that in the future we'll be looking at more of the standards, and especially the European ones as they're rolling out. So I think folks have all seen these. These are the profiles that got added into 3.0.1, of which if you're documenting an AI system, you could potentially have fields that are on any of these ones that you would fill in as part of building your SPDX file. So it's not just, I know some folks in NIST, no, not NIST, sorry, in CISA, they call it an AI bomb, and they're only referring to what we talk about as an AI profile. But AI systems are bigger than just this component. So that's why I asked Matthew sort of what is the mindset of what is an AI bomb? Because to me, an AI bomb covers all of these features. And if it's relevant to your AI system, then you should be filling in the information. So again, just a little bit about the standards, but we'll go into this in more detail in a second. And just to give a glimpse before I go into Gopi, Art, and, you know, and Kate, myself have this user guide or white paper that someday will be published. Right now it's, you know, in Linux editorial phase, but I've gotten Kate's permission that I could share, you know, a copy with you guys at the end of today's document. But what it does is it really goes through, well, we'll go through it in a second, but it goes through, you know, what are the fields in the AI and the data sets of BOM? What are some use cases and examples of how you would fill those fields in? What are, you know, if you're coming, we took a look at model cards. So, you know, what fields did we take from the model cards and which ones did we not take, and the reason why we didn't take? The same with fact sheets, the same with data cards, and the same with the ISO standards and the medical regulations and the EUA Act. So you can see, according to those different regulations or cards, what ones did we take and incorporate in to SPDX 3.0 and which ones we didn't. But as we go into the next phase of 3.1, we are, of course, are going to relook at, you know, all of these are continually changing, and we'll try and figure out if there's other fields that we need to incorporate now because they're needed. We also, within SPDX, have a number of other profiles, you know, the hardware, the functional safety, testing, operations, service, and as I say, these harm or threats type profiles that AI is going to contribute to, so that you're capturing not just traditional software information, that you will also capture information, you know, associated with an AI system. The other thing is there continue to be tons more standards. In fact, I'm just reviewing 3 more on AI right now that are about to be published from an IEEE. As I say, the UN is documenting sort of a governance plan that we'll need to look at. There's something called harm cards that we're looking at to incorporate. Gopi's done a great job, and I would highly recommend, you know, bringing him back and having him talk about sort of where software is evolving to as we move into Gen AI, prompts, RAGs, etc. And then another area that we've had some preliminary discussions, but we is around impact statements. You know, do we have a link out? A lot of standards in particular requests that you have an impact statement for your software, and they have a set of fields that you need. Do we add those fields to SPDX, or do we just have a link out to, you know, some spreadsheet? The same thing, I you know, was talking to Sandra last week. We in IEEE and ISO very much, we need a way to flag if content or data has been generated, or even the software has been generated by AI itself, as well as I'm on the Biden executive order, and there's a working group associated with synthetic data. And so that's another area that I can see that working group is going to request that people have to document if they're using synthetic data, because it comes with the risk of, you know, copyright infringement, patent infringement, and who knows what else types of harm can come from that. So that gives you an idea. But before I go to this one, we do have this document. The link is here. I mean, you can get your traditional model diagrams of SPDX, or you can actually dive into the code itself. It's all up on GitHub. But we've found that, especially for the tools developers, as well as explaining to people what SPDX and how you create these files, it needed another. Initially, we called it a white paper, but I come from more product background, and it's more like traditional user guides. It tells you how to use this language of SPDX. So before I dive into that, maybe there's some questions that folks want, or I can skip to the document. But questions, any questions?
Thanks, Karen, for that really good overview of the work that you and the team have done there. I think there's clearly lots of good work around AI bill of materials, and even touching on that synthetic data and all the other good points there. I don't have any specific questions for you, but maybe others on the call do.
Yeah, I mean, I know, Matthew, you had said folks wanted to know sort of reasons why, etc. I'm just going to pull up the white paper. It's rather long. I didn't realize it was this long, Gopi. But we would love feedback. I mean, that is our biggest sort of want of talking with people. You're welcome to come. We have a working session every Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern. I know it's not the best of times, but it, feel free to use our Slack lines or, GitHub to ask any questions, or any fields that you see are missing that you think we should come. Because one of the things that we're planning to do is similar to how we wrote this document after sort of it was all done and said. But I think this next go around, we will document before we go and actually have the fields and maybe send it around for review before we start implementing it in actually the GitHub repository. So with that, let me share the document. But as I say, it's protected at the moment, but if you request permission, as I say, Kate will give you permission to take a look. Whoops, wrong one.
Are you able to share the link in the chat now, or maybe send an email around later?
It's in the document, but I can send it around. But let me just show you sort of the flow of it. So, it's got an overview. It shows you the idea of an AI system type diagram. And you now have
Karen,
yep.
Can you zoom out just a little bit more? I'm not sure if I'm getting the full screen.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, I'm not getting the full screen either.
Or maybe I am. Maybe it, what is the most right thing that you see that we should be seeing?
Should you be seeing a diagram?
Yeah, do we see it? So data set files 1, 2, and 3 on the right-hand side. Is that the complete screen?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Disregard my comment. Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just sharing the Google Doc. But as I say, you can see sort of you have AI build packages, models, training sets, etc. That are part of your AI system. So you have profiles that can define these. We then went into what motivated us for separating it into an AI and a data set profiles, because I know our sister group at Cyclone haven't sort of reached that decision. I think they're going to find it, because you don't always have, you might have data and you want to be able to document that and sell that. You might have an AI model and you might want to do that. And then you might have a whole system that includes all of it. So I think being able to parcel it into different components was we talked about it for quite a while when we were developing the profiles, but you can see our motivation. And then sort of why it matters, why we broke it down into profiles. As I say, we go into quite detail about our methodology of how we got to the list that we got to. And here's an example of sort of data sets. So we looked at a number of data sets. They have certain fields, you know, that are in their data set. We mapped it to sort of the actual internal SPDX fields and where in which profile it was in. And then you can see an example of one that we decided as a working group that we weren't going to include, at least for that initial release. And you can see sort of our explanation why. And we did that for data sets. We did that for model cards. Again, you can see sort of all the different fields in the different model cards, Hugging Face, you know, Google's, whoever is out there. If you have sort of cards that you want us to look at, and IBM, they didn't use model cards, they used fact sheets. So again, we went through the similar exercise. We also went through the exercise to do with the standards and regulations. As I say, the EUA Act, which I'm sure over in Europe is something that is talked about, but it at least allows you to see the different clauses that are in the EUA Act and sort of what field is in the AI bomb and then which profile it's in XPDX. And then we went through all the medical devices out there, regulations, both the European and the US, and did a similar exercise. Showed you which fields that you would fill in. We went through the same exercise, as I say, for the ISO and IEEE standards. So in, you know, 7000, it has a clause like this. This is the field that you would fill in to be compliant with that standard. So you would have to fill all relative information. And then we go into the key profiles and sort of what they contain. And then in each of the key profiles, there's mandatory fields and, you know, optional fields. And so again, you can see the field that you have to fill in SPDX, which profile it's in, you know, whether it's mandatory or not, and then a general description about what that field would be composed of. With AI, we have created some new relationships as part of 3.0. Of course, there's the license one for all software, including AI, that you have to have a license relationship. But hopefully this gives you a field. I mean, I'm going to go down to the next part. So that gives you a table of all the things. And then the user guide itself talks about each of the fields, whether they're mandatory, gives a little example, code example, syntax of how you would use it for each of the fields within the AI and the data set profiles. And then at the end, it's going to be a long one because there's so many fields. We have real world evidence examples of which Gopi and Art, who works with us as well over in the EU, they're up on GitHub and we're planning to put more up there, but it would show you, you know, how you would, there's an AI system and how you would map it into SPDX so that, you know, a tools developer, et cetera, can take a look at it. And do. And then, as I say, future directions. We also put in a curated standard list of all the AI standards that are coming out so that you can pick and choose which ones might be relevant to you. And that's pretty much it. So hopefully when I take a look at the white paper, I will post the link right now. that you'll give us feedback, because this is, you know, for all of us. As I say, I do, my area is self-driving cars, and that's the context that I came in. I only joined sort of SPDX 3 years ago with Gopi, and was trying to bring in the need to document some of our code, because what I could see happening in at least some of the car manufacturers I was working with, developers were deciding who lives or dies. And it really worried me that, you know, and, you know, I was working with BMW, and their developers were doing one set of rules. And then I would go to Mercedes-Benz, and they were using another set of rules. And it made me realize that we needed some kind of standard or whatnot associated with, or you at least have to tell people, you know, what are those decisions and documentation of the code that are going into that AI app. And again, I'm sure with all of your experiences in building these, you're seeing the same thing. So again, Gopi and Victor, since you, Victor's actually a key player in our working groups as well. Is there anything else that you wanted to add? I was just trying to do an overview, but I think the bottom line is you all want, you're looking for this white paper. I think in general, that's what people are looking for. Even, you know, I get from, I'm on the Tiger teams associated with CISA, and everybody's trying to figure out, you know, Cyclone DX, SPDX, which format should I use? And overall, it just depends on, you know, what information you need to capture. But I think this document will help people figure out. And if it doesn't, let us know, because we'll, oh, Victor says he's in a car, so he's not going to be able to come on. So
Yeah. Hey, Karen, if this is a good time for questions.
Sure.
So what kind of, this is awesome, by the way. This is really interesting material. I think it's perfect for us, you know, in this group to understand. What kind of timeline are you on for 3.1?
Yeah, I mean, that's probably better asked of Kate. If Karen had her way, it would be definitely in this calendar year. But I don't know, like Gopi and I, as I say, we joined 3 years ago. Within a year, we had the AI and the data set profiles ready to ship. Maybe a year and a half max after we were doing some testing and whatnot. And it took almost, was it 2.5 years, Gopi, before it actually got launched? So I'm not sure that I could predict, but as I say, the AI space, and in particular, you know, the EUA Act and some of these other regulations, the UN is getting in there. I mean, SPDX is not going to be able to cover everything in fields, but I think we need to at least tackle some of the low-hanging fruit, you know, like harms. This is a big one for me, in that there's all these incident reports, like even car accidents, that tell you what went wrong on your AI, you know, self-driving car. Why are we not taking that information and understanding better what value in maybe bias? Like myself, I did an audit of Tesla's, some of their car crashes, and it's a lot to do with the data that was used. It was very biased against women. And unfortunately, if they had been measuring that, maybe they could have prevented some of these accidents. Maybe not. But that's, to me, the next phase that has to go along with whatever SPDX sort of next release. So the timeline in Karen Bennett's mind, and I will tell Kate that I said this, but it's this calendar year.
That would be terrific. You mentioned the AI Act. If I can just follow up, on something you just
Sure.
read, that so I understand the commission asked Sensenelec to be putting together some implementation pieces of it. Do we have any connection to them? Because my impression from just out from the outside is that that they may not necessarily be on schedule, and it's not clear to me what their timing is going to be.
I
Mhm.
mean, as I say, I joined the EU project office to try and keep a handle on what was happening. I'm actually just in the process of joining their, is it J2 EC groups or something, that are the working groups associated with the EA Act, which are the real standards that are going to come out. I mean, they tried to work with ISO and IEEE, but those two organizations, according to the Europeans, are moving too slow in this area. And to be honest, I would agree with them. But I think it's they, if I believe their timeline, they're trying to have something out this year as well, standards associated with the EU Act, so that they can get down to bigger grassroots of how somebody documents and how somebody might audit an application. Because just saying that you can't use facial recognition, there's some apps that using facial recognition, to me, are low risk and some are high risk, and I think they need to get to that level of detail over, in some of those working groups. So that's why I wanted to join and try and bring in some, industry perspectives to some of the discussions going on. So I know you folks, one of the groups we've had come in and talk about the EU Act is some of the folks in Microsoft EU. They're actually gave us a list of what they propose we should put into SPDX. It's something that we're going to take a deeper dive at and figure out what's going to go in. And as I say, write a document if we choose not to take some of the work. But hopefully that answers your question. It's very hard, I will say, with all these groups, like the UN coming out with their set of thoughts. I personally know I'm on IEEE's AI governance document that probably will be coming out in the next couple of months. But nobody is taking it to the next level, and that's what I'm trying to voice within ISO and IEEE. You need to get down to the deeper level for developers. I mean, myself, I'm not a developer. You need to tell me what I need to document, what fields. I just don't need provide evidence or provide an impact statement. Like, what details do you need? And that's what I was hoping we could get with some of these white papers is, okay, open source folks, if you write an application that you want certified, my daughter does certification for medical devices. And so she was the one that was a catalyst for me to try and understand. And now, the US government, and I think Europe is also going to use it, is, use an SBOM type thing or an AI bomb to document, and then the regulators can look at what you have, and then they can decide whether your medical device can be certified. It's pretty easy once you get the information in place. Hopefully, did that answer your question? Tiffany.
Hey, Karen, thanks so much for a great presentation. I'm not a builder. I'm a lawyer, and I support things from an ethics perspective. So, a lot of the things you said really resonated with me. And as you said, there's so many groups that are trying to figure this out. And I agree with Dave that, what you've shown is like fantastic and probably the furthest along from what I've seen. I had two questions. One was just general, at a high level, what types of pushback did your group get in terms of trying to get everyone to have some type of consensus over a lot of these. I think even just in what's happening with the EUAI Act and the Code of Practice and trade associations, you see that there's a lot of fighting over what types of transparency disclosures should be made. And then second, how is SPDX looking at how these standards may need to evolve to keep up with different types of regulations, or is the intention to say, this is scoped out for our purpose, and other regulations, you may need to add for other types of things. And what I'm referring to there is on Friday, Governor Newsom in California signed the generative AI training data transparency bill that has a long list of some of those pieces. Again, it's more narrow to generative AI. It doesn't, so it's more use case specific, but is SPDX going to try to also make it a one-stop shop that can be a compliance tool? Sorry, I know that's a lot, but those are my two questions.
And let me take the second one, and Gopi, feel free to jump in because you're our resident Gen AI expert. Myself, we've had in the working group a lot of discussions. Many of the industry leaders, we've had Amazon, Google, Intel, you name it, Microsoft. They really don't want SPDX or, SBOMs to have every field that every regulation out there wants. So they put there's been a lot of pushback, and discussion about, is that field really needed, sort of, to be for regulation. And while we did look at the EUA Act and these IEEEs, etc., and there happens to be a field that we had already discussed, and they're there, so we've documented it. But one of the things that SPDX, and I need Kate and Gary on the call, but it's something that the AI group opened up, is we think there's a need for something. We labeled it views, so that you could have, if you're just want to be compliant with the EUA Act. I mean, myself, I'm in Canada, and there's about to be a Canada AI Act, but anyway. But if you want a specific certification and you want an SPDX file that allows an auditor to certify you, you could have a view that would be only those fields are the ones that you need to capture. And so I know that's being talked about. Whether it will be part of 3.1, I don't know. But I think that's the plan of where they want to head, is not everything will be sort of in the core profile, or I guess they would be in the core profiles, but you could pick and choose what you wanted to present as a view of your SPDX file. And then the second, if I understood the question, again, in discussions within SPDX, we get pushback because a lot of these industries think that they have their crown jewels as part of the information that would be in an SPDX file. Go ahead, go ahead.
Okay. Sorry, I just wanted to add something. For the question about it being a compliance one-stop. Yeah. The idea is, at least for I know Karen touched a bit on this. I just wanted to clarify something. The idea is we want to re-architecture 3.1 in a way where we have a base template going where minimum compliant components are there. And then it would have the vision is to have an extensible architecture where if you come in with a new regulation, you can inherit some of the fields and just custom define the fields that you need and make it available as a part of the standard. It's almost like is a hub. And then people can just use that particular template to comply to a specific regulation. I hope that clears some things up.
Yeah, no, thanks, Gopi, for clarifying that. So to go to your second question, I this is just Karen Bennett, maybe others have thought, but I do not think you're going to get industry partners giving away publicly posting an SPDX file. That's why with the minimum set of requirements that the NTIA group is looking at, there are things that they don't think are proprietary information or might have patent information type in there. But as you want to be certified by some of these standards, or being able to sell in different countries, you will have to provide their information that they need in a document, an SPDX file, probably under NDA, that an auditor cannot share with the outside world. So I think there will be some public ones, and then I think behind the scenes. But of course, open source software will all be free. And right now we're trying to talk with a number of the groups, especially within GitHub and Hugging Face, that there's a common place where you go to find your SPDX files or your, Cyclone DX files. Did that answer the question? I mean, I work with lawyers on a day-to-day basis. So I know, I mean, there's an IEEE AI governance, as I say, document that's coming out. It's for lawyers. I think it's pretty good explaining sort of rules and regulations going forward, but I'm biased.
What jurisdiction would that be in, that IEEE paper you talked about?
Which one? Sorry, Matthew?
What jurisdiction would that cover, that IEEE paper you were just talking about?
Yeah, so it's pretty general.
Okay.
Their use cases they go from social media type platforms all the way to, I don't know if they actually had self-driving cars as a use case, but, finance, but they're trying to cover the broader perspective. And it's similar to me of what I read in the UN governance sort of pledge. It's really trying to figure out, if you're in car regulation area, there are certain standards that you need to also apply with, even if your code is AI related. So it's trying to give you education. To me, it's the pre-document to starting to put some laws together in some of these different countries, if that helps. Just give some insight into where the issues are, where the harms are that are coming against humanity.
I do have another question about the different fields that you selected. How did they go into the spec? Was it based on just general consensus or based on what regulators were after?
The fields that are in that white paper?
No, sorry, the fields in SPDX 3.0.1.
Yeah, so yeah, Gopi, do you want to take that one? I mean, there a lot of discussion went into what fields were in and what were out. But we always tried to figure out how the field would be used to, better the software. But I'll let Gopi try because he did a lot of the heavy lifting there.
Sorry, I missed the question. What did you want me to answer?
How did you choose which fields were appropriate to go into the SPDX 3.0.1 standard?
Oh, okay. So the process was, as Karen was mentioning, we exhaustively started with taking down all the fields for model cards, data sheets, and fact sheets. And then through the community discussions, we iteratively eliminated fields that weren't either relevant or we already had fields to capture it. And then through discussions and as research was evolving, we added more fields, but we made a conscious choice to not worry too much about Gen AI because we were doing this in 2021 and 2022. And finally, for the minimum fields, we once again saw we took inspiration from the NTIA standard. and we tried to keep as little as possible. So I would say mostly through community discussions, and anytime someone wanted to keep a field, they were expected to give rationale and use cases. And anytime a field had to go, we had to show it could be represented with other things.
Okay.
Yeah, one of the areas that we're starting to put some attention to is actually working with a number of industry partners to see, whether they can build an SPDX file and, whether the information is useful to them going forward. So in particular, your Googles and your Microsofts and whatnot. So we're picking, and the open source projects. I shouldn't forget them. They're working with them to create SPDX files. But again, feel free to join us because we'd love the input and whatnot. And actually, we're coming your way, Matthew, because we got some ideas for things that have to go into the operational profile. So hopefully that answers your question. One of the things, I'm going to offer Gopi, but Gopi has a great presentation about Gen AI and sort of the future of software. That might be.
I see the benefit.
Yeah, you might enjoy listening to. He is running a sort of course here in Toronto, Canada. But maybe some set of it could be shared with some of the groups over in Europe.
Great. I think my internet cut out. I was just thanking you guys for some great work there and great presentation.
Alrighty.
No problem. Actually, I think this is a group that we're all going to try and join going forward because you guys are doing some great studies. And I read the telco presentation this weekend. So it's nice to see sort of how people are using SPDX. And, the light profile to me was a great addition to SPDX.
Hey, so that Gen AI presentation, that would be, I think, very well taken if we could get that scheduled.
Sure. I have some travel coming up, but if you guys tell me which time you guys meet, I can tell you. I can make one of the meetings.
We meet twice a month, one at this time zone, so first Tuesday of every month, 3 till 5 UK time. Please forgive me for not translating. And then we meet the following Thursday in a European Asia time zone, so 9 o'clock UK time. And that's kind of a repeat of one of the others. But I can follow up with you, Gopi, on that.
Okay. I just need to finalize my travel and then I'll send you a note. And I'm happy to present about the Gen AI content. If that's okay.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Awesome.
So our other agenda, oh, Karen, go on.
No, I was just going to say another offer is I'm looking at all the threats that AI brings. I would love to get your folks sort of, feedback on, do we have a good representation of some of the things that are out there? So I would offer to present that as well, if an upcoming meeting, if you're interested.
That'd be wonderful. Thanks, Karen. So you're more than welcome to stay on and listen to the kind of the next area of our work as you wish. But again, just thank you again for coming to present some brilliant work. The other agenda item we had today was to kind of follow up from what we had before the summer break, which was kind of drafting some guidelines on what we thought, sort of developing a guide for AI bill of materials for building trust in the supply chain. That was something that was discussed at our June board meeting and our September board meeting that we would continue working in this area. And what I would like to do is kind of bring this up. It was kind of shared around with those on the mailing list to kind of just go through some of the points that we had as a bit of a recap and then open it up for discussion. Is that okay with everyone?
Matthew,
Yeah.
thanks for having us. I have to drop off. I would like
Okay.
to listen in, but I'll try to join the next one. Thank you.
Thanks, Gopi. Is that okay, Dave? Should I carry on and share my screen?
Yeah, that sounds great, Matthew. Thanks.
So this is the document. It's just loading up now. And apologies, I appear to have poor internet. I will put the link in the chat. But this was sent round earlier this week, and it was earlier in previous months. But we have this document. Great, you can see my screen now. So it kind of built on the work of ISO 5230, which was the OpenChain licensing standard, and a number of other standards as well, so 42001, and our good friends from SPDX in 5962. And what we did is we kind of lifted what we had done with the ISO standard of 5230 and see how we could translate that from a licensing standard to a potential guidance for AI bill of materials. I feel as though the previous speakers in SPDX is more around the specific fields that one should be capturing or could be capturing in AI systems. This guide is probably slightly higher, which was a bit more detail, as in there are AI bill of material standards, for example, SPDX, but not go into the granular detail that SPDX is doing. But taking that to the next level, even higher, we go into more detail than, say, ISO 42001, which we discussed in a previous AI study group meeting, where that is more talking about risk management. So it's kind of we felt as though there was that gap between 42001 and 5962, and this is kind of a scratch pad, if you will, rather than any formal document, but it's an opportunity for us to discuss it and see if we can come to some form of general consensus. I'm happy to just go through each of the different headings and kind of talk about the history of why we had that in here, but feel free to chip in and discuss what your thoughts are around having these headings in there, having these clauses in there for a sense of guidance. And again, we're trying to build trust in an ecosystem. We're trying to, produce guidelines that if one company or one group of individuals were to build an AI system, they were follow this policy, these guidance notes, then it would build trust. So helping the whole ecosystem. So kind of have that in your mind when we're going through here. So just to start, we have this area of policy. We state that if you wanted to have good guidance in this area, we should have an AI compliance policy for a supplied system or model. That policy, again, we don't go into detail of what that is, but if your company were to agree to these kind of guidelines, then you should have an AI policy. Each individual company works in different areas, they'll have different use cases, and they will take different risks. But we feel as though having good governance and compliance in the AI bill of materials space, one should have a policy. This was also found in the ISO 5230 ISO standards on open source license and compliance. So we felt it was a good start to have a policy section in these guidance documents. I'm going to keep going until someone chips in if there's any concerns or comments, but I will keep going. I guess the first few are around just the setup of the document. The more interesting ones are maybe further down. The second area is around competence and identifying roles and responsibilities within an organization for effective program management. So if you are developing an AI system, an AI model, if you are improving it, if you're, it's passing through your company down the supply chain, you should be able to identify roles and responsibilities within your organization. That's going to be organization specific, but you should be identifying those roles. And then coming to section 3, those people in those roles should be aware of what they are being asked to do, or they're accountable for it. So they've seen the AI policy, they're aware of company objectives, and they're aware of what their contributions are to the effectiveness of the program and any implications of not following program's requirements. Moving on, section 4 was around program scope. So there's a clear documentation of what an AI system or model or project scope would be for the specific program. And then moving into something else that we touched on last time, and this is probably an area for more discussion, is around the licensing obligations. We wanted to ensure for good AI models and systems that the data sets, and that includes training, testing, verification, there is some way of verifying that the license obligations have been met. Again, that's your own company's interpretation of it, but a process should exist for this. Now, the reason we put this in there, and this is a direct lift from the other ISO standard that OpenChain has, was an opportunity for us to, I guess, separate the two standards. So people can either follow the license standard or an AI sort of guidelines. But we felt as though this was a good clause to have in there for showing good AI compliance. So we know that the data sets being moved through the ecosystem have been verified for the appropriate use and purpose. Do people still agree that this is a useful thing to have and would be demonstrating good compliance?
Hi, Matthew. This is Jimmy speaking. Yes, I still agree that that's a good thing.
Good. Thanks, Jimmy. Okay, let's move on. So we had another section, and this was more detailed in license compliance, and we're kind of highlighting the different use cases. So when a data set is being used, we have some form of, I guess, defining a use case of how this is being used. And we've kind of just got a few examples here. I sense these may be more appropriate for license compliance, and maybe we want to consider changing these bullet points for something more specific for models or data sets. What are people's thoughts on that?
Hey, this is Jeff.
Hey, Jeff.
Yeah, as I read the way it's written now, it's difficult to kind of visualize how this translates to data sets.
Yeah.
And the above kind of 0.5, understanding that the above one is about process, but I agree that. So ultimately, what are we trying to achieve with 6? So this text was lifted from the open source spec, right? So 5 is about a process to review identified licenses for the data sets or data within the data sets. 6 is about how do you distinguish the two?
Sorry, how do I distinguish the two?
Like, what
Yeah,
would be the point of 6 above 5 in addition to 5?
yeah. Well, I think that, and this is just my opinion, others please chip in. This is a group activity, but my reading of 5 was the process, as you point out. But here in the open source world, there was kind of different risks associated with, say, distribution in binary or source form, or there'd be different obligations. And I agree with you here. I mean, those bullet points I think are very specific for open source and probably not relevant for AI models. But is there anything here around use cases that we want to incorporate and definitely, change those bullet points because I don't think they're necessarily relevant.
Off the top of my head, in terms of use case, it's, are you distributing a data set versus are you using this for training and perhaps ramifications of the identified licenses? But maybe we can wrap that into 5 because, as you said, in the open source universe, perhaps 6 was a little bit more prominent. Might be able to kind of include that into 5 different use cases and the obligations, and the process has to accommodate for those.
What are other thoughts on this? Not hearing any other comments. I'm happy to review that afterwards and put this back out to the community for thoughts on that. So moving on, access, provide a process to effectively respond to external AI compliance inquiries. This again is lifted straight from the other standard. This is probably something that is probably a reasonable thing that a company should have. If you are contributing to a model or you are licensing a model or creating a model, there should be some way of an external individual to be able to contact you to say there's a problem or something like that. Jimmy, I see your hands raised.
Yeah, no, just speaking to sort of the reasonableness of this, I agree it's very reasonable to have it. Then there might be, we probably shouldn't go into exactly how that process should look like in each and every case, because there might be specific requirements due to local legislation in, for example, the EU or elsewhere. But saying that there should be a process, I think it's a good start. Perhaps one wants to word it as a process where sort of legislators and the general public can make inquiries, or some such would be valuable.
Can you say that again? A process where
where legislators or the general public can make inquiries. But not necessarily saying what that process should look like or if it needs to be the same process, but specifying that sort of the relevant authorities or government agencies can make inquiries as well as sort of the general public where sort of they would be in a position or have the right to do so. I'm not saying we need to necessarily change this text, but I think it's a very good requirement, but also flagging that that process may not necessarily be the same based on if it's a private individual or a corporation asking for it versus if it's a regulatory body and, for example, the EU asking for that information. That process might look different.
Okay. So yeah, make it more generic so it's not specific to certain requirements, because as you say, a personal individual versus a regulator may require different responses.
Yeah, and we should probably
or different SLAs in terms of like how
Yep.
How long do you have to respond and so forth?
Also, I think the Linux Foundation Open Compliance Directory, isn't quite as active as initially contemplated. So we might want to sort of just genericize.
Great. So we've just got one more, and then we've got, I think, the more interesting one about the AI bill of materials that I'd like to get different folks' thoughts on. So this is just, I guess it's probably just similar to other things in this section around having a program effectively resourced. So accountability for the success of the program tasks resourced, a process exists for updating policy documents, legal expertise pertaining to AI compliance is accessible to those who need it, and a process exists for resolution of AI compliance issues. I think this is probably just helpful for companies to think about the way that an AI system may be, if it has problems, that these processes exist. And I would imagine in most companies in one form or another, they already do in some form. So not hearing any particular comments on there. We now move down to the AI bill of materials. And again, we were wanting to provide guidance on sort of how AI bill of materials can be helpful. And you may notice from when Karen was presenting the kind of far more detail than this is going into. It would be good to hear what our thoughts are on the level of granularity. But for the AI bill of materials, we highlight that a process shall exist for creating and managing AI bill of materials that include, maybe I need to put may include, model details, license, instruction for deployment, explain how to stop the model when it's malfunctioning. Sandra recommends changing these words to details to prevent, detect, respond to, and resolve potential malfunctions. Ownership and liability, limitations. Again, Sandra recommends capabilities and limitations. And its use case, in particular, out of scope use case. And then for the majority of the other areas, data sets, training sets, testing sets, validation data sets, we have similar things around the license and how it's used. And then we say, and other relevant fields which an organization may want to include, for example, the SPDX AI profile, Hugging Face, or other SBOM related to AI. What are our thoughts on this section here?
Hi, this is Brian here. Listening to the talk the last hour, which was amazing, one of my big takeaways, it really validated a lot of our discussions over this past year about if there's too many required fields, people are not going to want to participate because they have, certain interests. So I think to the extent we can make this list more succinct and maybe focused on some of the lower hanging fruit, I think that might be more effective. And then we can make reference to, say, SPDX or other resources that are out there.
What are other thoughts on this? I think I am in agreement with you there. I think having listened to the previous talk, lots of good work being done elsewhere. Maybe we refine this to highlight, for good AI governance with AI bill of materials, we state that we should have one. That should be then down, and a process should exist for creating and managing and storing and archiving and all these other good things. But maybe we don't list the kind of specifics.
I think it could be interesting to list some specifics as exemplary. So, in case someone wants to understand what do you mean by an AI bomb, but I think it would be prudent to not list them as a checklist of required fields personally.
Any other thoughts or comments on that? Sorry, was that Brian? Was that you talking just then?
Yes.
Okay. Testing results. A process shall exist to examine testing results to determine whether it is suitable for the organization. I think that's probably reasonable. Licensing requirements. There should be a process to determine the license requirements and other IP rights. I think we may have covered that in section 5. Now, the next 2 sections, I'm hoping someone else can chip in and remember what we discussed before the summer around technical specifications. The process shall exist to examine technical specifications, including model architecture, compute hardware, and software. Does anyone recall what this point was about?
Listening, but I don't recall. I sort of would strongly advise against having sort of anything about patents or patent applications that may apply. That's A, it's a very hard determination to make, and B, it's sort of a field ripe for abuse. If one might want to point out sort of necessary trademarks or something that's relatively binary to check against, that's one thing, and I think that's fine. But the point on patents and patents applications just in particularly triggers me. But I think it's fine to sort of have it remain on things that are relatively binary and relatively easy to check, maybe, such as trademarks or copyright, in terms of like, is there a match towards a known open source component here in the training data or in sort of certain output.
So, Jimmy, and thanks for that great point. It's always a sensitive issue around patents. I mean, I propose, unless I hear otherwise, that we maybe even consider removing the whole of 9.3.
I would be fine with that, and if someone comes up with and reminds us of why we put it in there, then happy to reinsert it or parts of it. But for now, I think we can probably remove this one.
And then moving on to.
Sorry. I was going to say, I also want to you pointed to it. There's some sort of relationship to 5 and 6 above, and just structurally, what's the overlap there? And that may be an argument for just removing this too.
Yeah. Thanks, Jeff. And moving on to that 9.4, does anyone else recall these points? I'm happy to go and listen back to the recording, unless anyone else can remember the points of, or who recommended adding this. And then impact assessments. This is my understanding of EU AI Act, and in the US, I think they're called risk assessments, or maybe the other way around. And we've left a header here, but no further comments. I'm wondering whether we, again, put, depending on the jurisdiction, have a process in place for relevant assessments that may be required depending on the model or the system or the project that we're working on.
Yeah, I think that sounds good. I think I wouldn't go into too many details in this section because I believe the scope of impact assessments in the US might differ from one of the risk assessments in the EU.
Thanks, Sandra. So, I mean, we're still early on in the development of this guidelines. Maybe that's something we can go and investigate in more detail and come back to this group with suggestions. So we've got to the end here. As you can see, we kind of put some things out of scope around environmental impact. I think that's the same point with the bottom one, sustainability, as well as transparency and bias. Clearly, I want to say kind of important areas, but you know, there's regulation out there, there's other standards out there. I think we work to OpenChain's strength around license compliance and process management, and we maybe focus on kind of the 10 points above that line, and either leave others or come back to any one of those points for a future iteration. What are people's thoughts on that? Well, we can certainly leave it there. And then I think this was just the extract of ISO 5230. You can see a lot more references to open source in here. So we can probably put that on hold. Well, that's kind of a half-hour review of our guidelines so far. I'm happy to make some of the minor tweaks around removing certain clauses and sending it out for further discussion and review. Would that be of interest to the team? Are we still keen to do that?
Yeah, that's a good idea, Matthew. Let's do that.
Thanks, Dave. Okay, well, that kind of comes to the end of the things that are on the agenda here. I had a good talk from Karen and Gopi and others on SPDX. I think it was good to review our scratchpad there. I think, as I said, I'll review some of the things that we've discussed and then send it around for further review. And I'll also follow up with Gopi on some of the presentations. Is there anything else that people are wanting out of this study group?
Hey, Matthew, can you talk a little bit about the conversation around converting from a study group over to a working group?
Yeah, I think it's probably a good point, because a study group was set up to just kind of brainstorm some ideas, and a working group is something that's we're working towards something a bit more concrete. It's a great point, Dave. We're probably in a mature enough stage to consider progressing to a working group. And if I recall from the board meeting earlier this year, to convert from a study group to a working group, we need to come up with kind of a proposal to do such, and then that goes to the board for discussion. I think we're in a stage now where, given the fact that we have these guidelines, given the fact we've sort of got lots of people's different inputs, we're probably ready to convert to a working group. I'll open it up for discussion if others kind of agree, and I'm happy to either work with people to draft something or allow others to draft that proposal to the board.
Matthew, do you think it would be okay for us to frame it as a point of discussion for people to think about, and then we can make a decision perhaps at our next meeting?
I'm all for community discussion, so absolutely. So why don't we put it on the agenda for next month, that we will talk about, I guess, the process and the benefits between of going to a working group, or what we need to do to get to a working group. And maybe we can, well, what do you think, Dave? Do we create a proposal for this group to review before our next meeting, and then we can review it at the next meeting before submitting it to the board? Does that work well?
Yeah, we probably need some kind of a statement of intent around, you know, what we propose to do, you know, in terms of the work product in the working group.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think we're on a good track, and maybe we just put that into words, and maybe that's enough.
Yes, as a point of order, the next board meeting where this could be discussed is in November, connected to the member summit, the Linux Foundation member summit. So if we want to have it this calendar year, we need to have a proposal by then. Yes, that's point of order.
And Jimmy, does it need to be taken to the board or in a board meeting, or can it be done via email?
I think that's a very good question. I think we could move for a decision over email, but I also think if possible, it's probably better done in the board meeting.
Okay. Well, we have our next
But
study.
Shane would be the master of ceremonies of that, so I would sort of take his advice on it.
We have our next AI study group on the 5th of November, and the next OpenChain board meeting, if I recall, is it the 11th or the 18th of November? So we have an opportunity to meet before the next board meeting. So why don't a few of us work on that statement of intent? Maybe we can share it around with the mailing list, and then we bring it back to this meeting, and if there's kind of agreement, then we can propose taking it to the board.
I think that's excellent. And to be clear, I'm not entirely sure if at this point in time, if it's the board or the steering committee that would need to approve it, but that's almost a distinction without the difference. It's largely the same participants, and it happens at the same timeline. But let me get back to this group on what the formal procedure is. I will follow up with that over email.
Thanks, Jimmy. Anything else then? Any other business? Hearing none, I'm happy to propose closing the meeting, and we'll meet again. There's a Europe-Asia session next week, and then we meet again in a month. Thanks everyone for their time.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matthew.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you.